Okay, good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
Hi, Alan. All right, good evening. So I'll just give a brief recap of last week's events, so to speak, and then what we saw was the story of Amatzia, right? That's what we were focusing on, and we saw that Amatzia actually at least started out his reign quite well. Okay, let me just mute everyone, and then if you want to unmute yourselves. Okay, if anybody wants to unmute themselves and speak up or write in the chat box, whatever, please do. Okay, so we saw the events of Amatzia was that he started off his reign quite well in terms of, listening to Hashem, listening to the prophets. We mentioned, it mentioned, his merits that when he was able to get back and kill the assassins of his father, he only killed them, but he did not kill their children, okay, which was contrary to the common practice, but it is the correct thing to do. You shouldn't be killing, the children for the sins of their father. So he showed mercy in that regard. Then when he decided to go to war against the Edomites, and he had hardly hired mercenaries from the kingdom of Israel for a very large sum, and then the prophet came and told him, send them back. If you want to win the war, send them back. And he listened to the prophet, and he took a great risk because, first of all, he was going to war with less armies than he had counted on. He had hired 100,000 mercenaries, so that was quite a significant amount. He was also going to lose all the money that he invested in it. And the prophet promised him, trust in Hashem, Hashem will provide for you for more than that. And as we mentioned, he also raised the anger of the mercenaries who were turned back from the war, and therefore they didn't receive the spoils that they were due to receive. And therefore, when indeed happened is that these mercenaries, again, from Mamlechet Israel, from the kingdom of Israel, they took retribution and they attacked cities in Yehuda from which they took booty. So they exacted revenge on Amatzia for doing that. But nevertheless, so we could sort of pin, if we sort of want to sum up, his merits, we could sort of count them as three main merits. And parallel to those three, we'll see the three sins that followed. One is the mercy that he showed on the families of the assassins of his father. Second one is the belief in Hashem, that Hashem had the power to take care of him financially and at war, despite the risk that he was taking, and the fact that he listened to the prophet. After he won that war, everything was reversed. We first pointed out the viciousness. They took 10,000 captives alive, and they slaughtered them in a very cruel manner, throwing them off a cliff, right? So we mentioned that sort of, the reverse of the justice and mercy that he had showed at the beginning of the chapter. Then we saw all of a sudden that now he turns and worships the gods of the Edomites. And we sort of explained, from the perspective of those times of the idolatrous world, what was the logic in doing that? You sort of want to appease the gods of that you just inflicted or conquered their people. But again, obviously for somebody who's supposed to believe in Hashem and completely and not believe at all in other gods, then that was a very grave sin. And when the prophet came to rebuke him on him, and we said that prophet was actually Amos, Yeshayahu's father. According to Chazal, that was Amos, Yeshayahu's father, the brother of Amatzia, and he came to rebuke him on it. He actually threatened him. He said, nobody asked for your advice. And if you continue to give the advice, something may happen to you. He hinted, in other words, he threatened him as well. And because of that, the conclusion of Amos was that, he's sort of using the same expression that Amatzia said, who took you as an advisor to the king, now Hashem will take advice or take counsel against you. Okay, so that's a brief recap of the events of last week Amatzia. So now, again, our whole purpose is to try to lead into Yeshayahu's period, and this is the period right before Yeshayahu. Okay, so now let's see what happens next with Amatzia and how his downfall, his unfortunate downfall, is going to come about. Okay, so I'm sharing the source pages. Okay, and we will continue reading. Right, so again, the end was that the prophet said, I see God has counseled that you be destroyed since you act this way and disregard my counsel. So now the next verse, this is again in Divrei Yamim Bet Perek Kafei, the book of Chronicles, chapter 25, now verse 17. So now we have the expression of Vayivaatz, which again is to counsel. Vayivaatz Amatziyahu melech Yehuda, וישלח אל יואש בן יואחז בן יהוא מלך ישראל לאמור, לך נתראה פנים. Okay? So now what's going on here? Yoash is the king of Israel, and Amatziyahu is actually threatening Yoash, the king of Israel, with war. He's saying, לך נתראה פנים, come, let us confront each other. Okay? The king of Amatziyahu ben Yehuda took counsel, sent his message to Yoash, son of Yoachaz, son of Yehu, king of Israel, come, let us confront each other. Why is he threatening war with the king of Israel? We explained last time why he went to war against the Edomites. You know, they had previously been subjugated to the kingdom of Judah. He wanted probably their taxes. He wanted control. Fine, but why now? He's all of a sudden he's threatening Melech Israel. I mean, granted, these are two separate kingdoms, but they're brothers. You know, it's been for quite a while that these are two separate kingdoms. Why is all of a sudden Amaziah, you know, making these threats against the king against the kingdom of Israel? Anybody have a suggestion?
Is it because Israel's soldiers took the booty and attacked?
Very good. I think you're correct. That's the only logical explanation, at least, that comes out from the story. Again, he had hired these mercenaries from Israel. After he sent them back, as we saw earlier, it said earlier that the men of the force that Amaziah sent back, so they would not go with him into battles, made forays against the town of Judea, to Samaria, to Beit Horon. They slew 3,000 of them and took much booty. Okay, so apparently he's upset against these mercenaries, like Alan said, and so he's holding the king of Israel responsible. So I guess he's sort of threatening him, either you make amends for that, or we're going to have an issue with each other. Now, Amaziah, why is he doing this? Apparently he's feeling like sort of like he's on a roll, right? He just won a big war with a smaller army that he planned. So he thinks this war business is going well. If he won against the Edomites, then he can intimidate some of his other neighbors. Okay, so now let's see what is Yoash's. Yoash again is the parallel king of Melech Israel at the time. What is his response? Okay, so verse 18. וישלח יואש מלך ישראל אל אמציהו מלך יהודה לאמור. הכוח אשר בלבנון שלח אל הארז אשר בלבנון לאמור, תנה את ביתך לבני לאישה, ותעבור חיית השדה אשר בלבנון ותרמוס את הכוח. Okay, let's read it in English. King Yoash of Israel sent back this message to King Amaziah of Judah. The thistle is like a thorny bush, okay, in Lebanon, sent his message to the cedar in Lebanon. So we have like a small thorny bush, not very powerful, and he's sending a message to the cedar in Lebanon. Give your daughter to my son in marriage. But a wild beast in Lebanon passed by and trampled the thistle. Okay? Now he's going, so he's given him sort of a parable. Okay? Soon we'll discuss exactly what precisely this parable means. And now, in case, you know, his parable is not understood, he's going to translate himself. So he says, Amarta hinekita et Edom, unesacha libcha leachbid. אתה שווה בביתך, למה תתגרה ברעב ונפלת, אתה ויהודה עמך. You boast that you have defeated the Edomites, and you are ambitious to get more glory. Now stay at home, lest provoking disaster you fall, dragging Yehuda down with you. Okay, so basically, he's telling him, you know, you sort of got high on yourself because of this victory. You beat the Edomites, that's a small nation, that's an easy target. Stay at home. If you try to go to another war, it will not end up well for you. Okay, but let's try to analyze. Let's go back and try to analyze a little bit more this parable that he said to him. So he says, he gives a parable of a thorny bush, you know, sending to the cedar tree, give me your daughter in marriage, and then some wild beast just passes by and tramples the thorny bush. What is this meaning of give me your daughter in marriage? Anybody, suggestions, anyone? What is this idea of giving your daughter in marriage? What does that have to do with anything?
Peace treaty, uniting two forces.
Ah, very good, very good. In other words, what you're pointing out is something very correct, that diplomacy in those times in royalty, and in some places still to this very day, was done through marriage. Okay, so you're saying in essence, you know, by asking to take the daughter, it's a form of trying to make some sort of treaty between, let's say, two monarchs. But why? But where's the? So that seems something very nice. How does that connect to the threats that Amaziah was making against Yoash?
He's taking on a power much stronger than his.
Correct. But how is that reflected in the statement, "Give me your daughter in marriage"? Why does that show that he's taking on sort of a power that he's not entitled to? You're very right in that, but let's work it out.
It reflects an over-ambition, because he's not got that status where he can expect equality between the two nations and get the daughter in marriage. Is it because of that?
Oh, yeah, very good. Okay, so let's work it out. So we have to sort of get into a little bit the logic of ancient times and how they would do this diplomacy by marriage. Okay, so let's say you have two kings, right? And they want to work out some sort of peace treaty between them or some sort of cooperation. So they say, okay, one of us will marry the daughter of the other one, right? And we know this was, if you go all throughout history, like even in European history, you can see that a lot of empires mixed into another through these marriages. I think there's this famous saying about the Austrian Empire, that they basically conquered a lot of places due to lucky marriages and successors, etc. Okay, so now let's think about it. We have two kings, and they want to marry each other. Okay, who is going to take the daughter of whom? In other words, who is the one that's going to give his daughter to the other king? How is that decided? Okay, so usually the way it was done was that the more powerful king takes the daughter of the weaker king. Why is it specifically in that way? What does he gain by that?
Well, he gains the rule over the lesser kingdom, potentially.
Okay. In other words, theoretically, let's say this daughter is the only heir, then he could get the lesser kingdom, or let's say her son could be the inheritor, correct? Also, it's sort of symbolic, right? That he's now essentially, and this is something we'll discuss later on in the chapter as well, he now has a hostage, so to speak, because he's got the other king's daughter, right? If that king, you know, violates the treaty between them, he's risking the life of his daughter, essentially, because he's in the palace of this other king. So he's also got he has some leverage in that way, because he's essentially taking a hostage from the royal family of the other family. What is the other king gaining by it, by giving his daughter? What is he gaining here?
Powerful ally.
Okay, so he's gaining the ally. He's essentially making a treaty. And you could say, and some have claimed this, you know, in articles that have been written on this, that he's also gaining a spy in the other, within the other royal family. So there are advantages to both of them, but it was common practice that the more powerful king will take the daughter of the weaker king. Now, I'll give you a very interesting historical record for this, not for the Tanakh, where this is also displayed. Okay, this is something very interesting. That this is way before the story of Amos and Amaziah, but here in source number 7 I brought, there are these letters that were discovered. They're called the Amarna letters. So it's a whole very ancient correspondence. We're talking about something from around around here I put in the footnote, we're talking about periods of in the 1300s BC. And the story of Amotze Matzia is about 500 years later, around the 8th century BC. Okay, so, and this is a correspondence that took place. It's found in clay, and somehow they deciphered it. It was found in Egypt. And these letters are a correspondence between the king of Babylon at that time and the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt at that same time. Okay, and there are a whole series of letters there. And in one of the letters, in the letter numbered EA4, it says there, in other words, what happened was, apparently the background to this letter is that the king of Babylon asked that the king of Egypt give him his daughter in marriage, and Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, refused. And now he is responding to the king of Egypt's refusal. So he says to him, moreover, you, my brother, when I wrote to you about marrying your daughter in accordance with your practice of not giving a daughter, wrote to me and saying, from time immemorial, no daughter of the king of Egypt is ever given to anyone. Okay? Then he goes on to complain, why not? You should give me the daughter, and he's still trying to convince the Pharaoh to give him the daughter. But we see he's essentially quoting the previous letter of the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh said, from time immemorial, no daughter of the king of Egypt is ever given to anyone. Why the Egyptians refused always to give their daughters over? They would certainly marry daughters of other kings, but that was how they wanted to demonstrate their power, their superiority. And even in this case, despite all the king of Babylon's pleading, it did not help him, and the Pharaoh would not give him his daughter in marriage. Okay. By the way, when we hear about this and we think about the fact that Shlomo HaMelech did take a daughter of a king of Egypt, then we see how powerful must have Shlomo HaMelech have been to have reached such a status that he was able to receive a daughter of one of the pharaohs. Okay, so it was clearly a great achievement in terms of his worldwide power. So that's getting back to our story here. That's essentially what Yoash is trying to tell Amaziah. Amaziah is sort of threatening him, and he says to him, you threatening me, it would be like a thorny bush asking the cedar, in other words, a very weak king, asking a very powerful king, give me your daughter in marriage, and it's ludicrous. What does the cedar respond? Nothing. He doesn't even respond at all. He just lets a wild animal pass by and trample the thorny bush. In other words, this kind of threat or this kind of request, it's not even worthy of a response. In other words, he's saying to him, you're threatening me, you're completely out of your league here. You have no chance at all. Okay, now Yoash is actually, even though he's not, he's clearly ridiculing Amaziah, but he's actually trying to save him from war, and he's trying to prevent the war. So at least we should hold that in his favor. Okay, but now let's see what happens now. Let's see the continuation of the story. So verse number 20, V'lo shama Amatziyahu ki ha'Elohimi leman titam beyad ki darshu et Elohei Edom. But Amaziah paid no heed. It was God's doing in order to deliver them because they worshiped the gods of Edom. Again, Amaziah would not listen to reason. He did not back down. And this was all Hashem brought about because he wanted to bring about the downfall of Amaziah because he had worshipped the gods of Edom after the victory. Okay, so let's see what happens. ויעל יואש מלך ישראל, ויתראו פנים הוא ואמציהו מלך יהודה בבית שמש אשר ליהודה. Okay, so the king of so the two armies meet. The king of Yoash and the king of Amaziah confronted each other at Beit Shemesh in Yehuda. That was the location. וינגף יהודה לפני ישראל וינוסו איש לעolav. The men of Judah were routed by Israel, and they all fled to their homes. So sure enough, as Yoash had predicted, Yehuda lost this war and they all flee. So now let's see what was the outcome of this war. בעת אמציהו מלך יהודה בן יואש בן יואחז תפס יואש מלך ישראל בבית שמש, ויביאהו ירושלים, ויפרוץ בחומת ירושלים משער אפרים עד שער הפונה 400 אמה. So the king Yoash of Israel captured Amaziah son of Yoash, son of Yoachaz, king of Judah, in Beit Shemesh. He brought him to Jerusalem and made a breach of 400 cubits in the wall of Jerusalem from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate. וכל הזהב והכסף ואת כל הכלים הנמצאים בבית האלוהים עם עובד אדום ואת אוצרות בית המלך ואת בני התערובות וישוב שומרון. Then with all the gold and silver and all the utensils that were to found in the house of God in the custody of Obed Edom, and with the treasuries of the royal palace, and with the hostages, he returned to Shomron, to Samaria. Okay, so let's analyze a little bit closely what the results of the war were. So first of all, we see here that Amatziyahu, the king himself, was captured in the war, but Yoash returned him vayiviyeu Yerushalayim. Okay, he didn't take him as a captive, he returned him back to his seat on Yerushalayim. In other words, he was sort of leaving him in this position as king. But let's see now what he does to Yerushalayim. So the first thing that he does is, he makes a breach in the walls of Yerushalayim, Mishar Ephraim ad Shara Poneh 400 amah. He makes a breach in the walls of Yerushalayim. Now, where is this wall? Shar Ephraim. So Ephraim, to understand what's going on here, Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim, is the kingdom of Israel, essentially. So the Shar Ephraim, which is to the north of Yerushalayim. So essentially, Shar Ephraim was the gate in the walls facing north. Now, why did Yoash make the breach in the walls of Yerushalayim on the northern side specifically? Anybody want to make a suggestion? Yeah. Alan?
Just because it's the most defenseless against Israel.
You mean because it's facing Israel?
It's the easiest one for Israel to penetrate.
Right. In other words, it's facing north, which is the direction of Kingdom of Israel. So it's symbolic in that regards, that they're showing sort of, you have no defense before us, we're controlling you now. Also, if you know the topography of Yerushalayim a little bit, actually the northern side is actually the weakest side. It's like around the area of what today is considered Sha'ar Shechem, the Damascus Gate, which is a relatively flat area. So there is no natural defense there. Like on some of the other sides, you have more of a natural defense of like the hilltop. And on that side is sort of the weakest side. So essentially, he stripped Yerushalayim of its security by doing this, both in a practical way, that he's taking down the wall on the side that they need us most, and also symbolically, it's the side facing the north, so he's essentially asserting his control over Yerushalayim by doing that. Okay, the second thing that he does is that he takes out all the treasures, all the gold, the silver, the utensils that they had, all the royal treasures, he's taken them all. So essentially, what does he shut down now? He sort of shut down what you would call the Ministry of Treasury of Yerushalayim. And the third thing is that he takes the hostages. Who are these hostages? Anybody want to guess? This is connected to what we spoke earlier. So the hostages, we mentioned earlier that when you take the daughter of another king, you're essentially taking a hostage. Hostages was essentially their way of doing diplomacy. If you had deals with other countries, you would receive members of their royal family as security to ensure that they would be faithful to you in whatever treaties they had. And that was the way diplomacy was done. Hostages were exchanged. If I'm not mistaken, I think I even read, I read, you know, the book about the Sicilian Mafia, The Godfather, by Mario Puzi. Some very famous movies were made. So if I remember correctly, he describes there that when two mafia heads would want to meet, so how could they ensure security of the meeting? So family members were exchanged before the meetings as hostages. It's a way to conduct diplomacy. So all the hostages that were in Yerushalayim, I guess from the diplomatic relations of the kingdom of Yehuda with other nations, they were all now moved to Shomron, to the capital city of Israel. Okay, so essentially what has Yoash done? He's taken down the three most critical points of any government. One is the defense by taking down the wall. Second is the treasury, okay, by taking all the royal bank, so to speak. He's taken that all and removed it and taken it for him. And by taking the hostages, he shut down basically the foreign office of Yerushalayim. He's taken all their foreign diplomatic leverage, whatever they had, and he's taken for himself. He's basically destroyed the kingdom of Judah. He stripped it of any power that it's had. Okay, so the result here for Yehuda and for Amaziah is absolutely terrible. It's a complete destruction of the kingdom of Judah at the three most focal points of any government. Okay, let's see now what happens after all of this. So what were the results? ויחי אמציהו בן יואש מלך יהודה אחרי מות יואש בן יואחז מלך ישראל 15 שנה. Okay, so it says that the king of Amaziah, son of Yoash, lived 15 years after the death of King Yoash, son of Yoachaz of Israel. So what is being hinted to in this verse? That even though Yoash had won the war, okay, and basically Yoash, the king of Israel, he won the war, he completely stripped Yehuda of all its powers, but Amaziah outlived Yoash by 15 years. Okay, so there's a slight hint here in this verse that right after all of this had happened, Yoash died. Okay, and that's what Chazal say as well, or sages say as well. You can see it in source number 8. This is in Seder Olam Rabbah. Seder Olam Rabbah is the midrash which sort of tries to detail the chronology of the history of the Tanakh. So it says, Bo b'perek met Yoash uba lo Amaziah liYerushalayim. In other words, immediately after winning this war, Yoash passed away, while Amaziah returned to Yerushalayim, albeit to a much weaker kingdom. Okay, so we could sort of see here perhaps that this is a hint that Yoash was punished for what he had done. In other words, to win the war, okay, not your fault, you were attacked. But to go ahead and strip Yehuda in such a destructive way and strip the government completely, apparently he shouldn't have gone that far, and he was punished by immediately dying after this event. Okay, now let's see what happens. Verse number 26. ויתר דברי אמציהו הראשונים והאחרונים, הלא אינם כתובים על ספר מלכי יהודה וישראל. Okay, there were some book. The other events of Amaziah's reigns early and late are recorded in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. We know that there were other books around, although we do not have them nowadays, that recorded these events. ומעת אשר שר אמציהו מאחורי אדוני, ויקשרו עליו קשר בירושלים וינוס לכישה, וישלחו אחריו לכישה, וימיתו שם. From the time that Amaziah turned from following the Lord, a conspiracy was formed against him in Yerushalayim, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent men after him to Lachish, and they put him to death there. Okay, so now we have a rebellion took place against Amaziah. Apparently, why? Because of what he had caused. He went to attack Yoash Melech Israel, and the results for Yehuda was terrible. So it's not a surprise that this, people wanted to get rid of him. So there was a coup against him. Because of that coup, he had to flee to Lachish, which is another city in the territory of Judah. And afterwards, they came after him even in Lachish, and they killed him there. They brought his body back on horses and buried him with his fathers in the city of Yehuda. ויקחו כל עם יהודה את עוזיהו, והוא בן 16 שנה, וימליכו אותו תחת אביו אמציהו. So now they don't want to break the royal family, the royal chain from David. So they take Uzziyahu. Uzziyahu again is the king where Yeshayahu is going to start prophesying when he was 16 years old, and they made him king tachat aviv Amaziyahu to replace his father, to succeed his father Amaziah. And it says, Hu banai teilot vayeshiveh leYehuda achrei shchav hamelech im avotav. it was he, in other words, it was Uzziah, who rebuilt Eilat. Eilat again is Eilat, okay? He rebuilt Eilat and restored it to Judah after King Amaziah slept with his father. Okay, somebody asked me a few weeks ago, I think, if there was any archaeological remnants of the kingdom of Judah in Eilat. So I actually found a book which discusses it a little bit. There are some archaeological findings, but it's not completely clear what they indicate. But we do know that from the Tanakh that Eilat was first built by Shlomo Melech, and now we see that it was rebuilt, retaken back by Uzziah, the kingdom of Judah, and he rebuilt Eilat. Okay, now there's a little bit of a difficulty here regarding the sequence of these events, because basically after the war, it says that Amaziah was returned to Yerushalayim. Then there was a rebellion against him in Yerushalayim, because of which he flew to Lachish. Then he was killed in Lachish, and it also says that Amaziah was put in instead of Amaziah. So the question is, what exactly was the order of these events? What exactly occurred? Now, what's a little difficult in verse number 2, that we just read, is that it says, Hu banai Eilat ve'yeshiva Yehuda. In other words, Uzziah was the one that rebuilt Eilat and returned it into Yehudah's power. After King Amaziah slept with his fathers. Now, if Uzziah only came to power after the death of Amaziah, then this verse doesn't mean anything. What does this mean that he rebuilt Eilat after Amaziah died? Of course, he wasn't king before. Anything he could do was only after his father passed away, because only then he succeeded him. So, because of this difficulty, and not just because of this, for other reasons as well, Rashi comes along and says as follows. Again, we said that Amaziah lived for another 15 years after this war of Yoash that he had with Yoash. So Rashi comes along and says, this is Rashi on parallel psukim that we have in the book of Melachim, and he says as follows. I'm reading here on the bottom, the entire 15 years, Uzziah, his son, reigned during his lifetime. And so it is written, and since the time that Amaziah turned away from the following of Hashem, there was a rebellion against it. Okay, so let's go back and understand what Rashi is saying. It says here in verse 27, from the time that Amaziah turned from following the Lord, a conspiracy was formed against him in Jerusalem. When was the time that Amaziah turned from following the Lord? That was immediately after the war with the Edomites. So what happened? That was the time he after the war of the Edomites, he worshipped the gods of Edom. He went to war against Israel, lost the war, and from that time there was already a coup against him. So Rashi says essentially the events were as follows. Immediately after the war, Amaziah, there was a coup against Amaziah in Yerushalayim, and he had to leave Yerushalayim and flee to Lachish. From that moment on, even though Amaziah was still alive, the de facto king was Uzziah. In other words, when it says that they took Uzziah and made him king when he was 16 years old, that was while Amaziah was still alive. But Amaziah had been forced to flee to Lachish. So for 15 years, Uzziah was the actual king, while his father, Amaziah, the former king, was in Lachish. After 15 years, Amaziah was killed, and now Uzziah was the proper king without his father alive anymore. Okay, so that's what Rashi explains. Now, how does this solve the issue of that we said regarding Eilat when Uzziah built Eilat? So Rashi explains when it says that Uzziah built Eilat achrei shchav hamelech im avotav, after the king lay with his forefathers. So Rashi explains as follows: after the death of his father Amaziah. From here you deduce that Uzziah reigned during his father's lifetime. Nevertheless, Eilat was not delivered into his hand until his father's death. For if he did not reign during his father's lifetime, why is it necessary to say after the king lay with his forefathers? And when you count the days of the Beit HaMikdash, according to the years of the kings, if you do not subtract these 15 years, which are counted for Amaziah and Uzziah, you will find that it existed 425 years. Okay, I'll just explain a little bit what Rashi here is talking about. Again, I'll try to sort of organize the sequence of events as it happened here according to Rashi. There was the war between Amaziah and Yoash. Amaziah lost the war, returned to Yerushalayim. Immediately after that war, the people in Yerushalayim, they didn't want Amaziah to be king anymore. They wanted him out because of the terrible damage that he caused. So they rebelled against him, and he had to flee to Lachish. From that moment on, Uzziah is now the functioning king. Amaziah continues to live another 15 years in Lachish, after which he is killed in Lachish. And then from that on, Amaziah is both the de facto king and the official king. His father has died, and now he's king for all purposes. After Amaziah died, Uzziah was able to restore Eilat to the kingdom of Yehuda and to rebuild it. So that's what it means that Uzziah did this after his father passed away, because he was king beforehand for 15 years, but this great success of rebuilding Eilat took place after his father has died. Okay, now Rashi gets there into a calculation, which we won't get into, as to how to count the years of, this is all during the first temple. So how to count the years of the kings during the first temple. So essentially what Rashi is saying, that when we list the kings, the years that Amaziah was king, and the years that Uzziah was king, there's actually a 15-year overlap, okay? So because 15 years are counted both to Amaziah and to Uzziah, because this was during the 15 years where Amaziah was still alive, but Uzziah was actually the one ruling, because he was the one in Yerushalayim while his father had to be in hiding in Lachish, okay? And this is very interesting because if you remember when we discussed Uzziah, Uzziah also had a similar situation that happened with his son Yotam, because after the whole story that we studied about, we mentioned briefly about Uzziah offering the Ktoret in the Beit HaMikdash, he also now became a leper, so he couldn't function anymore as king, and his son Yotam took over. So the same thing that happened to him with his father, that he had to take over the kingdom while his father was still alive, essentially happened to him himself later on. When he became a leper, he could not serve as king anymore, and his son took over for him. And there we'll have the same situation regarding the years. Again, we haven't yet gotten into the precise counting of the years, but the counting of the years when you study Tanakh of Kings is one of the big headaches, because there are a lot of contradictions. So here, for example, we have a situation where there's an overlap between kings, and you have 15 years counted for both kings. So we'll have sort of the same situation also, Uzziah with his son Yotam. Okay, any questions on that point? Okay, very good. So now let's take it to the next stage. Okay, so essentially, if we think about it now, we have, after this whole war between Amaziah and Yoash, we said that Yoash immediately dies after the war in Israel, and Amaziah does not die, but he has to flee to Lachish. So we have his son, Uzziah, coming into power. So essentially, at the same time, we have two new kings coming to power. We have Yoash's son in the north, in the kingdom of Israel, and his son his name is Yerovam, okay? And we have in the south, in the kingdom of Yehuda, we have also a new king, Uzziah, coming to power. And Chazal say regarding this, they use a very interesting expression that they say, let me just find it in the source pages, Uzziah veYerovam malchu ke'achat. Uzziah and Yerovam reigned at the same time. In other words, they both came into power at the same time. Uzziah came into power because his father was sent off to Lachish because of the coup against his father. So Uzziah now comes to power. And Yerovam also comes to power at the same time in the kingdom of Israel. And what we'll see next time is that this tremendously changed the whole landscape. In other words, until now, what did we have? How did the period of Amaziah and Yoash ended up? It concluded with a war between the two kingdoms and a devastating result for Yehuda. Uziyahu and Yerovam completely changed the situation. We saw a brief hint to it just in the verse of Uzziah building up Eilat, because if he's building up Eilat, you have to think about what the implications of that are. First of all, that means he's extending the boundaries, because Yehuda, you can imagine, is usually the territory of Yehuda is Yerushalayim and the vicinity of it. If Uzziah is able to reach all the way down to Eilat, the southern tip of Israel, that means he's extended the borders tremendously. Also, Eilat is a port city, so it gives the opportunity, to improve your commerce. Okay, so it's very significant. Also, on the way to Eilat, if he has Eilat in his control, that means he has the whole control of the desert all the way going down to Eilat. The desert is very crucial for international business at the time, because all the businesses that were coming from Egypt towards Mesopotamia were all going through the southern desert of Israel, and we'll read about that next week as well. So we see already hinted to, and we'll read this in great detail, that this is like a complete shift, a 180 degrees turn from the times of Amaziah. Uzziah is building up the king of Yehuda. Again, it took time, right? Like we said, it took at least 15 years after he became king until he was able to do this, but he eventually did. And as we'll see, also the relations between Uzziah and the parallel king in the north in Israel, Yerovam, they had good relations, as opposed to their fathers that went to war against each other. They actually had good relations. So this is a tremendous shift from what took place in the times of their fathers. We'll see great improvements in both in the success of Yehuda, the success of Israel. Both were very successful kings, but those successes also brought about certain improper behaviors, and that's sort of where Yeshayahu is going to come into the picture. Okay, so more about that next week, next Thursday. We'll read a little bit more about Uzziyahu, what transpired, and then we'll get into Yeshayahu proper, where he starts to address this time period. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, very good, everyone. Good evening.
Hello, Julia.